Why did you quit working on cruise ships? I worked on cruise ships for about 2 years, 3 contracts on 3 different ships for Norwegian Cruise Line. And after that third contract, I decided to quit. I left cruising for a handful of reasons, and I've kind of avoided this topic because I still believe that being a crew member, experiencing the cruise life, I think if you want to try it, I think you should. I don't think there's any one or handful of reasons to make it to where somebody who wants to try it shouldn't go. I would never tell somebody, don't do it. Ultimately, even though I quit, I still promote the experience. I still have lots of positive memories, and I think about it even now. It's been years since I worked on ships, and I still think about the good experiences that I had. But a topic that I've avoided talking about are the negatives. One of the reasons I don't really talk about the negative experiences on ships is because it's subjective. Something that I think is awesome on cruise ships or as a crew member, somebody else might hate. And something that I find unforgivable, that might be their favorite thing about being a crew member. So because it's so subjective, I didn't really want to bring it up because it's throwing shade where it doesn't necessarily belong, or something that it's just how I feel. So the reasons that I quit are specific to me and my experience and the culmination of those situations that I decided the best thing for me was to leave, But these reasons my experiences are totally different than somebody else's, anyone else. So the reasons people stay and the reasons other people leave, I can't really speak to that. I can only speak to my own experience. With that said, I left cruising for a handful of reasons. And really, those reasons, there wasn't one big problem that I said, you know what, this is because of this situation or because of this one aspect, I don't want to do this anymore. It was a lot of little things. And kind of what happened to me was over time, those little things, they just started to build on each other, right? So by that end of that third contract, I just didn't, there were enough little things that added up to enough of a weight that I said, I don't care anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. When I first started on ships, within a couple of weeks of my first contract, I knew I wasn't going to do it forever. I didn't know how long I was going to do it, but I knew I wasn't going to do it forever. Some people work on ships for 20 years, for just forever, and I'm not talking about just like the officers and people on the technical aspect, like captains who like their career is to be a captain or whatever. So obviously they're going to work on ships for their career, But there were room stewards and bartenders and people who'd just been doing it for so long. That was their job. But I just knew within a couple of weeks of my first contract that this isn't something I'm going to do for a very long time. But with that said, I did say to myself, I'm going to do this as long as I enjoy it, as long as I want to, obviously, right? The first thing that happened, or I guess one of the first one of the first reasons, as my list of like why I ended up quitting, was my position as a broadcast technician in the entertainment department. I had to share a room, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it, you know. And kind of something that set me maybe a little different than somebody else. I started on cruise ships when I was like 26, and I finished college when I was 22. So for 4 years before I started working on cruise ships, I had lived in a couple of different cities. I'd had a couple of different jobs. I had had apartments and bills and car payments, and I kind of figured out how to live like an adult, right? In my early 20s, I kind of figured it out. I could handle living like without my family and stuff like this. So kind of what happened was when I joined cruise ships, I kind of felt like I went back in time to a time when I had a lot of rules, right? When like, you know, sharing my room with my brother growing up, being in college, having a roommate in my dorm, you know, these rules that I hadn't had to abide by for 4 years, you know, since school or whatever. But I had a roommate, and I didn't have awful roommates, but I wasn't friends with any of my roommates. So I had a couple of them snored, and that was just, I'm a lighter sleeper, so it was really hard for me to fall asleep when my roommates would snore. I tried to be as accommodating to my roommates as I could, right? If they had their girlfriend over, or they wanted to have people over. Like one of my roommates was a musician, and they were like he and the singer of the show band, they were recording a song in our room. So I said, yeah, dude, take your time, you know, and I let them stay there themselves for a couple hours. You know, I tried to accommodate. I was trying to be a good roommate. But what I found was my roommates that I'd had over the course of my 3 contracts, they didn't seem to want to accommodate me as much, right? Like they would, like this, I had one roommate who just brought his girlfriend over every single night. So now I'm in a 3-person cabin every day that's big enough for 2 people. And big enough it's not big enough for anyone. But it was designed for 2 people, and he had his girlfriend sleep over literally every night. And I'm like, dude, like, at least do me the courtesy, because I'm not dating her, and I want a little bit of privacy. At least do me the courtesy and spend the night in her cabin a couple of times. You know, every other night. If you have to sleep together every night, stay here one night, stay with her the other, you know what I mean? Like, think about your roommate, you know? And it was little stuff like this, where I just felt like I tried to be as good a roommate as I could and give privacy to them when I could. But I just didn't feel like my roommates were giving me that same, you know, reciprocation, right? Another reason I ended up leaving was the money. I made like $2,000 a month. And I've talked about in the money video, like $2,000 like now on land is not that much money a month, you know, when you have bills and car payments and a mortgage and stuff like this. But on the cruise ship, I didn't have any bills on land. I made it to where I didn't have any expenses. So everything I made on the cruise ship, I didn't have to spend elsewhere for no reason, right? So it was all savings. And I did try my hardest to save as much as I could, right? And I saved a lot of money. But over time, you know, like I was like, well, the only way I can make this salary make me a lot of money is if I don't spend anything or buy anything or do anything, and only as long as I work on ships. And so I just felt like it wasn't. It was fine. It was money. It was good. I was saving, but it wasn't so great that, you know. And the thing is, once you start spending the money, like crew bar's cheap, but you spend the money. Once you start going off in ports and you say, you know what, I'm I'm going to take advantage of my experience and traveling and going to these different places. Once you start like doing stuff and buying excursions and spending money on stuff, like, and especially if you're spending money on like Wi-Fi and data minutes and stuff like this on the ship, like all this stuff starts to cost a lot, you know? Think about how much, when you're on vacation, how much money you spend. So I was like, well, if I go into port and I want to do something in port, it's going to cost me the same amount as it costs someone who saved up that money on their vacation. But I'm working from my smaller salary. That is nice when I'm not spending any money, but the second I want to start kind of splurging a little bit, and it's hard to not splurge when you're traveling to these awesome places, your salary gets spent pretty quickly, right? And then heaven forbid, and I didn't even have it, I wasn't sending money home, but like, you know, these people who have families and stuff back home, when they're sending money home, like it's not that much, you know, it's not bad. It's just, you have to take into consideration what expenses do you have to pay, and that's going to take a big chunk out of your smaller salary. So, you know, I was just like, it was okay. It was fine for the time, you know, but like I said, like I was living my life before cruising for 4 years. So I kind of knew the value of $1 in the United States, and I knew how much it cost to rent and how much things cost me, you know. And so the salary was nothing to be super, it was fine. It just wasn't this gobs of money that some people seem to think being a crew member is. Probably the biggest thing was people. I met a lot of great, and this is kind of like, there's two sides to the people. Of course, there's going to be people that I don't get along with, right? And you just try to avoid those people. Or like, sometimes you have a bad manager or whatever. My position as a broadcast technician, I was in a department of 2, me and one other person. And I was with that person. If I'm working with them, I'm just with that person all day, you know? So when you work with one other person, if you don't get along with that person, it's not a great time to work, you know? I have no one else to work with, you know? And I had a couple of broadcast technician partners who they didn't pull their weight, is how I felt. And so I would resent them from a professional standpoint, because I felt like I was doing more work and I'm not being compensated to do more than like, we're supposed to be equal here. I'm not getting paid more than you. I'm not your manager. We're the same. So I expect us to do the same. And it was really tough with some of these partners that I didn't think were pulling their weight, you know, and it was, and then it's like, well, like then you get in a situation where like, well, you can try to talk to this person, but if it goes poorly, you still got to work with this one person the whole time. So now it's awkward for however long it's going to be. And I didn't know, I guess I was afraid to confront some of these people, because if it doesn't go well, it's just going to be worse. Or at least that's what I feared, right? It was probably wrong of me never to say anything, but it's uncomfortable, right? I noticed that 99.9% of the time, people were friends with their coworkers. So I go to crew bar, and everyone's grouped together in their cliques based on who they work with. The youth staff all hung out together, and the gift shop people hung out together, and the spa people hung out together. And most of these positions had many, many people, you know? But me hanging out with the broadcast team, it was just one other person. And I was like, well, this isn't enough people, you know, for me to hang with. And so it was hard for me, because like I knew that in order for me to have more social life, I had to go and put myself into these other groups that they're already comfortable with each other, which I did. But you know, when I'm not there, they're not thinking about me either. So like when the youth staff were all in their work environment and they're all talking together about what they're going to do the next time there's a port day and some people are off and they're all discussing it with each other, they're not thinking, oh, make sure we call Sean and invite him, because I'm not there with them, so they're doing their own thing. So if I wanted to spend time with these other people, I had to like invite myself. I'd invite myself into their group, and I was uncomfortable too. I felt like a tag along. I felt like I didn't want to seem desperate, you know. But the thing was, every time I did it, they said yeah, because we were friends. But I don't know. I started to feel like, man, if we were really friends, they would call me. My first contract, I met people. I made some good friends. But I was so I was so overwhelmed with learning the job and figuring out the lifestyle and stuff that I didn't notice. I guess, maybe my individual relationships with people weren't super deep. But something happened. Like every next contract, I would meet people, and I would actually, like, I thought over time of working on cruise ships, I would be like, oh, this is such a fluid lifestyle. There's so many people that come and go, and the contracts end and start, and people are leaving and coming every week or every cruise. I thought over time I would get more like hardened to that, and like, oh, like I'll never get super close because there's no reason to, because they're just gonna leave and you might never see them again. But actually what happened was, over time, the more people I would get close to, the closer I got to them. So like, as time went on, when I would have friends that would sign off, it hurt more. Like my relationships like got more intense as time went on. So the more the more time that happened, and the more of my friends would sign off, the harder it was to say goodbye to people. And it's emotional, man. It's a wreck, you know. And that's just friends, like, not to mention like people you date, and you know how close you get so quickly working on ships with people. Like when you date people, you get really close, and then like one of you signs off, and it's just like, you know, it's heartbreaking, you know. So saying goodbye to people actually got harder for me as the contracts added up, you know. But like little things started to add up to me, right? So like I'd go to crew bar, and everyone's in their clique, their little group huddle, their little bubble, and I'd have to put myself in there, you know, because I'm not in any of these work bubbles. So I'm there talking to people, and man, everyone only talks about work, and I'm like, dude, I know that happened. We all literally live here. We all do this job. It's like, you're not telling me anything different, you know. It's like every day's the same. Like they complain about passengers, or they complain about something about the job, blah blah. And I'm like, I know. We're all here. You're not telling anything different than I've experienced, right? So I was like, why can't people try to talk about something different, you know? And so I try to change the conversation. I would try to be like, yo, what's your favorite band? What do you do when you're not working on ships? Like, I would ask anything that was unrelated to ships. But people thought that was weird. Like, people didn't want to talk about that. They wanted to talk about work. They wanted to talk about their life on the ship. That's it. They didn't care. They thought I was weird. I perceived that they thought I was weird because I was trying to talk about stuff that wasn't work related. That instead of complaining about ship life, complaining about work, I want to talk about something different. And they just wanted to complain and moan and talk about work. And I'm just like, I don't care. I don't work with you. I don't care. You know, can you imagine, like, if I just complained about my job to people, why would you care? If you work in the restaurants, why would you care about my difficulties at my job? You have no idea what I'm talking about. And why would you care? So let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about stuff that differentiates us. Let's talk about stuff that brings us together. How about instead of you telling me about your job, you tell me about you? That's kind of how I was thinking about it. And it just seemed like people were content. Like they're 10 work buddies and they're just talking about work and drinking some beer together and just goofing. And I was like, I didn't have that. So I was jealous of that, but also I was just like, and even when I'm in that conversation, I can't relate to it. I don't work with you. I don't have that experience to share with you. You know, it's just, I kind of felt left out a lot of times socially because of stuff like that. As the little things start adding up and you start thinking about, well, maybe I should leave, you know, I started thinking about like my future. One of the reasons I got a job on the cruise ship was to get experience in the field of videography and broadcasting, build my resume, right? And I mean, I guess at a certain point, I kind of felt that I had kind of stagnated with the stuff I was doing and learning. I wasn't struggling anymore. I liked not struggling. I was very comfortable. I liked that. But without a little bit of struggle, I'm not gaining anything either. I'm not working toward anything, and then you get kind of bored, right? It was kind of bittersweet. Like, I liked that work was easy, but it'd be nice to have a little bit of a challenge, I guess. But I started thinking about my future, and I was like, I mean, how much more can I do broadcasting on cruise ships? You know, I was like, well, maybe should I try to get a different job in a different department? Do I wanna? But that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, like I started thinking about like a career on the cruise ship, right? That would be what? So like broadcast tech was part of the tech team. So my boss was the technical supervisor, and then that person's boss was the assistant cruise director, and then the cruise director. So I was like, okay, is that the path? Or the technical supervisor, and then the entertainment manager? And you're like, so, but like the thing was like, broadcasting on paper was a part of the technical team, but everyone else on the technical team, besides the two broadcast technicians, worked in the theater, and I didn't know anything about theater. So the technical supervisor was mostly, if not 100%, involved with theater. So I was like, well, if I want to be that person who's technically my immediate supervisor, I have to learn that stuff, which is not even at all related to broadcasting. So I don't know any of that stuff. So how am I going to get that job anyway? And then I was like, and do I even want to do that job? Because do I want to do that job and then become an entertainment manager and then deal with the production cast and all that stuff and then be a cruise director? You know, because at that point I was like, well, if I want to be a cruise director, I might as well just go and apply to be cruise staff and just totally do a totally different job, you know? And I was like, so the way I saw it was like my career moving up the hierarchy to get promoted in on the entertainment side, it was almost like being a broadcast tech was a terrible place to start. You know what I mean? Because like, how am I supposed to get up from this crazy side? Like, broadcasting's over here and everything else seems to be over here. So I was like, I mean, at this point, I would just need to get another job anyway to start that whole ladder to go up to the next rung, you know, more realistically, right? So I was like, well, then why do that? You know, so I'll just stay with broadcasting until I don't want to do it anymore, right? Because I started when I was 26, and I already knew what like the real world was like in my early 20s, paying for rent, stuff like this. And I knew the value of $1, like before cruise ships, right? So I knew that like, well, I mean, I could get a job on land and all I needed to make is this, and I could work part-time, and I could get an apartment, and I could have my own room, and I could have a window, and I don't need a roommate, and all this stuff. And I can have days off, and it's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, part of me, I kind of wish that I had gotten a job on cruise ships immediately after I graduated college at 22, right? Because I would have had no idea what the real world was like. I would have had no idea what, like, how far my my work dollar would go to like, to living in different cities like I did. So without having that like knowledge or experience to compare ship life to, all I would have known was ship life. And if that's all I knew, I would have been like, well, this is life. This is how it is, man. I'm saving my money. I'm traveling the world. I'm meeting new people. Like, at least that's how I romanticize it, right? But because what really happened was I just saw that like I could make $2,000 really quickly on land and work less hours, and I could have my own room, and I could do stuff. I wouldn't have the perks of traveling, and I wouldn't have the perks of free food. But having your own room's a pretty nice perk, So it was, and then something. Okay, my personality is like once I start thinking negatively or start looking at something in a certain way, it's hard to unsee it that way. So once I started having these feelings of maybe it's time to leave, I couldn't really come back from that. You know what I mean? Once I crossed that threshold, I couldn't really come back. And then from there it was a slippery slope. It was almost like once I had crossed that threshold of like leaving is an option, it's almost like I started looking for more reasons. And the thing about cruise life, it's not that hard to find things that annoy you. They're easy to find. They're easy to ignore because there's a lot of great stuff too, but they're easy to find. And, I'd walk in a crew bar and I'd be like, talking about work again? Ugh, get out of here. I'm sick of this. It got mundane and it got boring, and I remember like toward the end, dude, I was dating this girl, and I would get, and like she would be content, like she would be happy, or just not hate cruise life, and I like started to resent her because I'm like, if you don't hate cruise life right now because of all the negative stuff that's BS, then you're wrong. Like you're clearly ignorant, and you're not. I didn't say this, but I was just like, if you don't feel the way I feel, then clearly you don't see reality, right? That's unfair. You know what I mean? But that's how I felt. And maybe I was reaching toward the end, just like looking for that confirmation bias of I'm leaving, so it's going to be, I'm not going to look for reasons to stay because I don't want to regret leaving, so I'm not going to even allow myself to see anything that could counter my argument of why I wanted to leave, right? It's funny now, like talking about it, because I talk to people about the cruise life and these videos and stuff, and I miss it. I didn't regret leaving cruise ships, but there are those moments when you're like, God, that was awesome. Why did I leave? Something I find funny though is I feel like when you're looking back at past experiences, I feel like, or like when I do, I feel like my mind only seeks out the positive stuff, right? It's almost like I block out that negative stuff when I talk about it. But I know that like I know if I were to go on ships again, within a week or two, I'd be like, oh, this is why I left for this and this and this and that. These are the reasons I quit. And it all come flooding back, and I'd be like, why did I come back to ships? But I do miss it. And like, I don't regret doing it at all. I want people to do it. I think people should. Part of the reason I make these videos is so that people can have more expectation of reality when you join the ship than I did. Because I didn't have as many people to get information from before I started. You know what I'm saying? So ultimately, I want people to be a little more prepared than I was. But with that said, everyone's experience is different because everyone's job is different. Every personality is different. Every person is from a different place. So your experience is inevitably going to be different. But I hope that in explaining some of the reasons I quit, some of the things that I found as negatives that ultimately all added up to me leaving, I don't want this to put anybody off of trying it, right? At the end of the day, one contract it's all contract work. I mean, like I didn't even really quit. Like I just didn't re-up my fourth contract. I mean, there's a situation where like you're expected to re-up unless they fire you. It's just expected that you're just going to do your next contract every time, right? They already book your flights and they already have your assigned to your next ship. So you have to tell them, I'm not coming back. So I just filled out a paper and gave it to my cruise director. But I mean, it's not like it wasn't hard. I mean, I just decided to not do a fourth contract. You know what I mean? But some people do more than 4 or more than 3. They do dozens, and they work on different ships. Some people go to different companies, whatever. Because maybe NCL, like maybe if I had gone to a different company, who knows, man? Or if I had done a different job, who knows? So that's why I try really hard not to be negative in this content because it wasn't negative. I just ended up not enjoying it enough to do it again. It was fine. But one thing is true is I do still miss it, or at least I miss the good stuff, the good stuff that I still remember, So I hope this was helpful. Like there are things that even the most optimistic person can't battle, but I still would never say don't do it. I absolutely think you should do it. Don't even question it. Don't even watch this video and think that anything that I experienced you're going to experience. It's going to be different. So I just felt it's better to be honest. And I have 20 something videos of positive stuff. Might as well, if Sean's so positive about cruise life, why isn't he doing it anymore? Because there's a counterweight to every balance, right? So life's all about balance, and after a while I decided it was no longer the best decision for me, but that's solely based on my experience and my position, based on my background and all this stuff, so go out and do it and enjoy it for all it is, because there's a lot of good stuff when as a crew member, and ship life is great. So good luck.